The ceremony will begin in 2 minutes. Please take this time to be seated and to silence all electronic devices. Thank you. Good morning, distinguished guests, family members, and friends of the 2nd Combat Aviation Brigade. On behalf of Colonel Walter T. Rugen and Command Sergeant Major Lourdes Barrios Powell, the 2nd Combat Aviation Brigade Command Team, welcome to the 2nd Infantry Division, 2nd Combat Aviation Brigade Non-Commissioned Officer Induction Ceremony. Today, we recognize the transition of soldiers from the junior ranks into the ranks of the Non-Commissioned Officer Corps, thus becoming part of the backbone of the Army. Please rise for the arrival of the official party and the invocation to be given by Sergeant Andre Crosby, and remain standing for the playing of the national anthems of the Republic of Korea and the United States of America. Today's official party consists of the United States Forces Korea Command Sergeant Major Anthony Mahoney. The 2nd Combat Aviation Brigade Command Sergeant Major Lourdes Barrios Powell.
Let us pray. Giver of life and Almighty Lord our God, today we come to you with deep gratitude in our hearts for all the gifts you have given us each day. Family, loved ones, good friends, laughter, our great jobs. Help us always to receive these gifts with thanksgiving, and may our hearts be stirred to remember all of your mercies which we receive through your love towards us. Today is a special day, a day of recognition of hard work and dreams realized. So we give you thanks that you gave these people the integrity and strength to make it through this far. To some present, this is a dream fulfilled. And to those, we give you thanks for their courage to follow their vision and see it to fruition. To others still present today, it is a stepping stone to the next stage of the fulfillment of their vision. Give these non-commissioned officers the strength to go those next miles that stretch before them. To all of these who will step up and give their oath today, I ask that you give a sense of pride in their accomplishment. Also remind them that they didn't make it alone. There were many who helped along the way, and they need to make sure they say their thanks to those individuals. But also remind them in each of their futures that you are interested in their success, and they are never alone in their journeys. For all of your gifts, we give you thanks indeed, but especially today, we give you thanks for the ability to reach for the stars and grasp them with joy. In the name of the Creator, the Savior, and the Sustainer, I pray, amen.
Please be seated. The tradition of commemorating the passing of a soldier to a non-commissioned officer can be traced to the army of Frederick the Great. Before one could be recognized in the full status of a non-commissioned officer, he was required to stand 4 watches, one every 4 days. At the first watch, the private soldiers appeared and claimed a gift of bread and brandy. The company non-commissioned officers came to the second watch for beer and tobacco, and the first sergeant reserved his or her visit for the third watch, when he or she was presented with a glass of wine and a piece of tobacco on a tin plate. Today, we commemorate this rite of passage as a celebration of the newly promoted joining the ranks of a professional non-commissioned officer corps, and emphasize and build on the pride we all share as members of such an elite corps. We also serve to honor the memory of those men and women of the non-commissioned officer corps who have served before us. Ladies and gentlemen, please focus your attention to the right side of the stage, where you'll notice a small table set in place of honor. It is set for one. This table is our way of acknowledging the fact that there are members of our profession who are not present. We call them brothers and sisters. This table set for one is small, symbolizing the frailty of each individual soldier engaged in battle against the enemy. Remember. The tablecloth is white, symbolizing the purity of their intentions to respond to their country's call to arms. Remember. The single red rose displayed in a vase reminds us of the families and loved ones of our comrades in arms who suffered their loss. Remember. The candle. The candle is lit, symbolizing the upward reach of their unconquerable spirit. Remember. A slice of lemon is on the bread plate to remind us of their bitter fate. Remember. There is salt on the bread plate, symbolic of the family's tears. Remember. The glass. The glass is inverted. They cannot drink with us today. Remember. The chair. The chair is empty. They are not here. Remember. The eagle is symbolic of our nation and our freedom. Remember. Remember all of you who served with them and called them comrades, who depended upon their might and aid and relied upon them. Remember. In a small tribute, I'd ask that you please stand as we take a moment of silence as an expression of our gratitude to those NCOs who have made the ultimate sacrifice for us. Please be seated. Since the earliest days of our Army, the non-commissioned officer has been recognized as one who instills discipline and order within a unit. In his instructions for sergeants and corporals, Baron Frederick von Steuben, the U.S. Army's first drill master, listed in his blue book the regulations for the order and discipline of the troops of the United States, that each sergeant and corporal will be answerable for the squad committed to his care. He must pay particular attention to their conduct in every respect, and that they keep themselves and their arms always clean. In dealing with recruits, they must exercise all their patience, and while on the march, the non-commissioned officers must preserve order and regularity. Today, we continue that tradition. The Creed of the Non-Commissioned Officer has served as a guiding document for NCOs since its inception in 1973, though its concepts have always been a part of our Corps. The major paragraphs begin with three letters, N, C, and O. The Creed inspires NCOs and serves as a compass to guide us down the right path. Today, our newest NCOs will affirm their commitment to the professionalism of our Corps as they become officially part of the backbone of the Army. Ladies and gentlemen, please direct your attention to the table in front of the stage as the NCO spirits are lit.
Red symbolizes courage and strength of the non-commissioned officer and the blood we shed in defense of our country. White symbolizes the purity and commitment of the non-commissioned officer and our dedication to honesty and integrity in word and deed.
Blue symbolizes the valor and pride of the non-commissioned officer and our participation in the many battles fought across the waters of the world.
A soldier's request.
Mark, move, halt, sense of faith.
Treat me with respect, Sergeant, for no heart is more loyal than the heart of an American soldier. Do not break my spirit with your words, Sergeant, for though I will do what you demand, your guidance, patience, and understanding will more quickly teach me to be, know, and do.
Speak with me often, Sergeant, for your praise and counsel is expected. I am an American soldier expected to be trained. Discipline must be a part of my life.
I ask no greater glory, Sergeant, than to defend our country and our way of life against our enemies, both foreign and domestic. Allow me that privilege, Sergeant. Train me.
Train me, Sergeant, for I must learn to fight and win in the heat, cold, the wet, and the desert. Those who would be our enemies will use these elements. I must be prepared.
Provide me the necessities of food and drink, Sergeant. Train me to be self-sufficient, that I may lead the way and stand ready, willing and able to protect you. My life if necessary. Should your life be in danger?
Train me, Sergeant, that one day I too can be called Sergeant. Trainer of soldiers, the backbone of the Army. Train me to accept those responsibilities that are yours. Train me to train my soldiers to become the greatest defenders of freedom in the world.
Sergeant, train me to be a sergeant. I shall leave the Army, and with my last step and my last breath, know that my fate was always safest in your hands.
Division is one of 10 divisions in the U.S. Army, but it's the only one permanently forward deployed.
That means we train, and we train hard. We expect to face high-intensity conflict, so we train for high-intensity conflict.
is to deter North Korean aggression and to be ready to fight and win tonight if deterrence fails.
Being the only forward deployed division in the Army requires us to be ready to engage the enemy at the drop of a hat.
We expect to work alongside our Korean partners to defeat the enemy. So we train alongside our Korean partners, and we are ready to defeat the enemy.
After all, isn't that why you joined the Army in the first place?
Sergeant, train me, that I too may earn the title sergeant.
Ready, face. Forward, march.
What is a non-commissioned officer?
I am a sergeant. I operate in an environment where the sparks fly. I am where the axe meets the stone. I am the first lifeline to all soldiers. Of all the grades of NCO, I have the greatest impact. Privates, who are the basic manpower, strength, and grade of the Army, generally have me as their first NCO leader. It is I that the privates look up to. I am the be, know, and do. I am a sergeant.
I am a staff sergeant. The major difference between a sergeant and I is not, as often mistakenly believed, authority, but rather the sphere of influence. I have direct contact with many soldiers. I generally have more equipment and property to maintain. I am a staff sergeant.
I am a sergeant first class. My position of platoon sergeant is key in the command structure of the Army. I generally have several staff sergeants who work under my direct leadership. I am expected to embody all the traits of a military leader. Watching me successfully operate on a daily basis is an unforgettable experience. There I am training the platooners section in their respective tasks. Here I am checking maintenance. There I am planning, executing, perpetual motion, a blur, the personification of a military leader. I am a sergeant first class.
I am a master sergeant. I serve as the principal NCO in staff elements, battalion and higher levels, where I'm normally assigned as the NCOIC. I serve as the subject matter expert in my field. I display leadership and guidance over other senior non-commissioned officers in my staff section. I perform my duties with professionalism. I am a master sergeant.
I am a first sergeant. When talking about a first sergeant, you are talking about the lifeblood of the Army. There can be no substitute for this position, nor any question of its importance. When first sergeants are exceptional, their units are exceptional. For the first time, the title of grade is not sergeant, but first sergeant. First sergeants are responsible for formations and assisting in the training of all enlisted soldiers and advising the company commander. I am a first sergeant.
I am a sergeant major. The sergeant major is the key enlisted advisor of staff elements at brigade level and above. My knowledge and ability are equal to those of the command sergeant major, but the sphere of influence is generally limited to those directly under my charge. I am a sergeant major.
I am a command sergeant major, senior enlisted advisor to the commander at battalion and above echelon. I advise the commander of training, accountability, and administrative action of all enlisted personnel. I am responsible for the discipline and conduct of all personnel. I am the ruthless execution of standards and the enforcer of discipline. I am a command sergeant major.
Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the Senior Enlisted Advisor of the 2nd Combat Aviation Brigade, Command Sergeant Major Lourdes Barrios Powell.
Good morning. All right. Distinguished guests, soldiers, families, and friends of Talon Brigade. Today we celebrate and witness a very special ceremony, a true rite of passage for 46 newly promoted non-commissioned officers who will be inducted into an elite and prestigious corps. First, before I continue, I want to really thank the team for this tremendous ceremony that they put together. I watched them rehearse, and this is a team effort from 3-2, 4-2, 6th-2nd, 2-2, first sergeant, senior non-commissioned officer putting this together. So thank you, great job. Whoa. Whoa. It is truly an honor to have with us today the senior ranking Command Sergeant Major of the Korean Peninsula to make this event an even more unforgettable one. It is my privilege to introduce today guest speaker who took time out of his busy schedule to travel across the peninsula to celebrate and witness this special occasion. He enlisted in the United States Army in 1984 and completed one-station unit training at Fort Benning, Georgia. He has served in the Army for more than 28 years in various airborne and light infantry assignments throughout the United States and overseas. He has held a leadership position as a team leader, squad leader, platoon sergeant, first sergeant, drill sergeant, assistant inspector general, battalion observer controller, and battalion command sergeant major. He formerly served as a command sergeant major for the United States Corps of Cadets, and most recently for the United States Military Academy at West Point, New York. He's a graduate of Austin Peay State University with a Bachelor of Science degrees in biology. His military education includes, but is not limited to, all levels of non-commissioned officer education system, Ranger School, Drill Science School, Basic Airborne Course, and Air Assault. His awards and decorations include, but are not limited to, the Legion of Merit, Bronze Star Medal, Meritorious Service Medal, Afghanistan Campaign Medal, Iraq Campaign Medal, Kosovo Campaign Medal. For a complete bio of today's guest speaker, please refer to your programs. Without further ado, it is my honor to present to you today's guest speaker, the United States Forces Korea Command Sergeant Major Anthony W. Mahoney. Who?
How's everybody doing today? I know I'm all fired up after that video. That was great. Hey, I'm always humbled to do these things, and I never pass on an opportunity to talk with a group of great Americans who comprise a very small minority. We're all a member of one of the smallest minorities in America, the people who have the courage to put on a uniform and do uncomfortable, dangerous things in the defense of something that we know is freedom. So you should be very proud of yourselves. And I will never pass on an opportunity to stand before you as a member of your team. So thank you. At 4:30 in the morning, 12 April, back in 1861, the Confederate shore batteries began bombarding Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor. Lincoln immediately issued a call for 75,000 volunteers to put down the insurrection. 4 years, 620,000 dead soldiers later, the Union was preserved. As I begin, I want to thank Sergeant Major BP, I call her BP, for inviting me here today. And I began my research at what I was going to talk about. And it occurred to me that we just celebrated the 238th birthday of America's Army. And in a couple days, weather permitting, we're going to celebrate the 237th birthday of the United States. And it's a pretty profound time, I think. So I wanted to go back in history a wee bit and talk about some things, what it means to be a soldier and a non-commissioned officer. I'm a simple guy. I'm an infantry guy. I don't know a lot about aviation. So I can't talk about aviation. So I'm going to try to talk about some of the things which are near and dear to me, which is the history of our great republic. And it's in no small part a tribute to people just like you. As those newly formed units, now that let me get off script for a minute. I warned Sergeant Major that I tend to get off script because things come to me. I don't know I can't explain them. There are a lot of couch commandos and armchair generals around today who read about places like Fallujah, the Korengal Valley, and Yusufia, and with no inconvenience to themselves. They sit in an easy chair, preparing to go about their business the next day as usual, and later, over a latte, they will expound theories to their friends. These people haven't understood a thing. I will predict that one day we will ponder what we did to grow young men and women like you. Young men and women who volunteered to serve your country. And I just can't be more proud of you. General Thurman can't be more proud of you. You know, we're old guys. There's a lot more behind than lies ahead. We've had our time in the sunshine. And all we can do is put our arms around the future of our institution, you, and thank you for what you're doing. So know that your efforts are appreciated. As those newly formed units marched south through Washington, D.C., John Hay, who was President Lincoln's secretary, observed, when young men like these leave their horses, their women, their wine, and harden their hands and eat crackers for a week, all for a principle, it's hard to imagine any possibilities for such an army. 3 years later, after hard fighting during an address to an Ohio regiment whose enlistments were expiring, Abraham Lincoln said, "I am greatly obliged to you and to all of you who have come forward at the call of your country." You see, what Lincoln understood about military service was that it's about people and their motivation. We have motor pools full of tanks. You have an airfield full of helicopters. We have harbors full of ships, but all these things are just machines. They don't solve problems. They don't react when they're cold and hungry. They don't feel the loss of another of their kind. In the final analysis, they're just tools, things we use to accomplish the often uncomfortable missions that our Commander-in-Chief assigns us. Never forget, ladies and gentlemen, that wars are fought with these machines, but they're suffered by people. But the issue with people is that we're very complex. We can solve problems. We react to cold, and we react to hunger. And we feel the loss of one of our kind. We're adaptive. We solve problems because we reflect upon what has happened in the past. Those are known as facts. And we think about what might happen in the future. Those are called assumptions. We deliberate our next move. We make decisions. But with these decisions, we also accept consequences. And that's part of the decision-making process. You cannot avoid the consequences of your decisions. One would argue that a major part of the structural decision-making framework which we use in our Army has been codified as the 7 Army values: loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor and integrity, and personal courage. Some of you may consider these quaint and old-fashioned, but these are values which provide us guideposts for the conduct of our duty, both on and off duty, in and out of uniform, on and off the installation. They still apply. They could give us a range fan. They help develop character. They're the structural building blocks of character. And one's character, I got to tell you, is manifested by what you do, not what you say. Actions, not words. One can deceive with flowery words and embellished appearances, but your actions reveal your true character. You've all seen the movie The Wizard of Oz. Remember when the little dog Toto pulls back the curtain and exposes the real wizard? That's the true character. In our decentralized operating environment today, leaders at every level, that includes you, are required to make ethical and moral decisions. It reminds me of the lyrics of an old Bob Seger tune. We sometimes find ourselves standing on a mountaintop, staring at a great divide. I could go east, or I could go west. It was all up for me to decide. Right? Decisions. You display your true character when you make the ethically correct decisions, regardless of any potential personal discomfort and without expectation of any personal rewards. Martin Van Cleveland noted it best. When rewards become meaningless and punishment ceases to deter, honor alone retains the power to make men march into the muzzles of the cannons trained on them. Never forget that your actions speak louder than your words, and your actions are the true manifestation of your character. So as you go forth and assume positions of greater responsibility in America's Army, we're going to expect a lot out of you. We want you to expect you to lead by your example, by your character, and not through coercion. The future is not preordained. We can choose whether we go east or whether we go west. And in doing so, we have to accept the consequences of our decisions. We're not victims of outside forces we can't control. We decide how we conduct ourselves. Never, ever, ever compromise your character. That great patriot Thomas Paine said it best. Character is much easier kept than recovered. And any man who from sinister views or littleness of soul lends his hand to injure it, contrives a wound it may never be in his power to recover. So here's a tip. If you're not willing to call your mother and brag about her about what you did this past weekend, if you're not willing to explain to your mother how you got yourself in a jam because of your bad decisions, you need to rethink what you're doing. You can never, ever change what you regret. We bring discredit upon ourselves, our unit, and our nation by our own egregious acts of willful misconduct and through our inaction in the presence of it. There's no excuse. There's no defense for your misconduct when you know it's wrong and you go ahead and do it anyway. As soldiers, we all have the general military authority to take action. The road to military dereliction is paved with the acts of commission as well as the sins of omission. I'm evangelical in my conviction that all failure at the individual level is attributable to one of three reasons: lack of training, lack of resources, lack of motivation. If any of these ingredients are a recipe for failure, then if they're present in the correct proportions, they'll produce delicious success. Knead that mixture with a little bit of leadership by example, and I guarantee you, you'll have a cohesive, productive unit. During a recent interview, Lieutenant General Jeffrey Talley, commanding officer of the U.S. Army Reserve, he was asked, of all the leadership lessons you've learned in your career, what's the most important? He replied, leadership is about commitment, competence, and character. The most important of those by far is character. If you don't have character, it's impossible to be a good leader. It all goes back to character. It's about humble, selfless service, being engaged, making positive impact in the world by serving something rather than yourself. When you look around the world at CEOs and senior military leaders, the CEOs may have a high level of success, but they forgot about being a humble servant. They start getting confused and thinking it's really about them, and that's generally when you see them self-destruct. It is a privilege to lead others. I was promoted to sergeant in March of 1986. Many of you in the room weren't even in the Army in the March of 1986. But I've learned a few things over the years that as young NCOs, if you don't remember anything else I say today, remember these three things. When the artillery shells start landing in Seoul, it's too late. It's too late to trust. It's too late to become disciplined. And it's too late to get physically fit. If you do not install trust in your units, trust in your chain of command, trust in your equipment, trust that our commanders will make the right decisions, trust in our allies, you will not be effective. If you don't develop discipline within your units and within yourself to make the right decisions, you're not going to be an effective unit. And if you aren't physically fit to put on the body armor and move out and complete the mission, you're not going to be a successful unit. As a matter of fact, if you lack those things, you're going to be more of a hindrance than you are of a help. So young NCOs, work on trust, work on discipline, and work on physical fitness. Because when the bullets start flying, it's too late. You cannot go to the supply room and requisition a leader of discipline. You got to have it. So don't waste time. Time is a non-renewable resource. Once you waste it, you can never recover it. It's gone. We can get more of everything except time. Just a few days ago, on the 28th of June, back in 1985, after 4 years of very brutal fighting, the Grand Army of the Potomac was disbanded. I'd like to read to you his farewell address, General George Meade. Soldiers, this day 2 years ago, I assumed command by orders of the President of the United States. It's not necessary for me to enumerate all that has occurred in these eventful years. Suffice it to say that history will do you justice. a grateful country will honor the living, cherish and support the disabled, and sincerely mourn the dead. I predict that in 20, 30, 50 years from now, when the historians look back on this thing that we call the global war on terror, and they realize that the American military, completely made up of volunteers, conducted themselves with honor for 12 long years. And our country would be very grateful for what y'all done and what we're going to ask you to do in the future. But it all goes back to character. And I'm going to finish with this. There's a delightful book out there that many of you in the room have read. It's called Once an Eagle. It's a guy named Anton Meyer. And if you haven't read it, I suggest you put it at the top of the reading pile heap. The protagonist of the book, a man named Sam Damon, was an Army officer. And he's talking to his son at one point. And here's what he tells his son. That's the whole challenge of life, to act with honor and hope and generosity, no matter what you've drawn. You cannot help what or when you were born. And you may not be able to help how you die. But you can, and you should, try to pass the days in between as a good man. Thank you very much for allowing me to spend some time today with you to camp. It is indeed my honor. Thank you.
On behalf of the warriors of 2nd Cat 2ID, thank you for your mentorship during 2nd Cat induction ceremony. Second to none. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we will formally induct newly promoted sergeants into the ranks of the Non-Commissioned Officer Corps. Each inductee will be presented with a copy of the NCO Creed. They will also receive a copy of the NCO Charge, the Army Non-Commissioned Officer Guide, and Army Leadership Manuals.
First time, do we have any non-commissioned officer to be inducted today?
Yes, Sergeant Major.
Who are they?
Sergeant Eric Collins.
Sergeant Sean Davis.
Sergeant Julius Johnson.
Sergeant Justin Christopherson. Sergeant Justin Flynn. Sergeant Charles Langella.
Sergeant Marcello Martini. Sergeant Christy Scott. Sergeant Eric Video.
Sergeant Jared Bellinger.
Sergeant Angelina Billy. Sergeant Felix Butler.
Corporal Young Hyuk Choi.
Sergeant Nathan Cottrell.
Sergeant Christopher Jacoby. Sergeant Brian Geiger. Corporal Hongson Han. Corporal Yang Woo Yi. Sergeant Johnson Harold.
Sergeant Joshua Layton. Sergeant Janelle McCoy. Sergeant Brian Scott.
Sergeant Carlos Segura.
Sergeant Carissa Small. Sergeant Rhonda Coleman.
Sergeant Philip Blake.
Sergeant Armando Gutierrez. Sergeant Keith Hamilton. Sergeant Madeline Morales. Sergeant Alonis Populus. Sergeant David Smith. Sergeant Adrian Vaughn. Sergeant Omar Richardson. Sergeant Tony Anders. Sergeant Gregory Boucher.
Sergeant Josephine Jackson.
Corporal John James Kent. Sergeant Jamal Madden. Sergeant Benjamin Myers.
Sergeant Ernest Miller.
Sergeant Thomas Schroeder.
Sergeant Kobe Smith.
Sergeant Joseph Smith. Sergeant Thomas Bradley.
Sergeant David Wisniewski. Corporal Doug Young Yu.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a thunderous round of applause for our newest inductees. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, Sergeant First Class Mark Gatling will administer the charge of the non-commissioned officer to our newest inductees.
Charge of the newly promoted non-commissioned officer. Inductees, raise your right hand. I will discharge carefully.
I will discharge carefully
and diligently the duties
of
the grade
to
which I have been promoted, and uphold the traditions and standards of the Army. I understand that soldiers of lesser rank are required to obey my lawful orders. Accordingly, I accept responsibility for their actions. As a non-commissioned officer. I accept the charge. To observe and follow. The orders and directions. Given by supervisors. Acting accordingly to the laws. Articles and rules. Governing the discipline of the Army. I will correct conditions detrimental. To the readiness thereof. In so doing. I will fulfill my greatest obligations. As a leader and thereby confirm. My status as a non-commissioned officer.
At this time, we'd ask that all past and present NCOs stand to recite the creed of the non-commissioned officer, to be led by Staff Sergeant Justin Coffins.
The creed of the non-commissioned officer.
No one is more professional than I. I am a non-commissioned officer, a leader of soldiers. As a non-commissioned officer, I realize that I am a member of a time-honored corps, which is known as the backbone of the Army. I am proud of the Corps of non-commissioned officers, and will at all times conduct myself so as to bring credit upon the Corps, the military service, and my country, regardless of the situation in which I find myself. I will not use my grade or position to attain pleasure, profit, or personal safety. Confidence is my watchword. My two basic responsibilities
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the singing of the Warrior March, the Army Song, and remain standing for the departure of the official party. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's ceremony. Thank you for attending. Please take time to congratulate our newest members of the Non-Commissioned Officer Corps, and of course, join us for some great cake in the back of the auditorium. Thank you.